Hello everyone, welcome to Naomi's Bookshelf. Today we're going to talk about my recommendations for Buzzwordathon in March. So March's prompt is a location in the title. It can be a country, a city, it can be a room in the house, it can be whatever a location you choose. I am going to go with several different varieties and I am very excited for this list. I actually own 9 out of the 10 books that I'm going to recommend to you because I really love them. So let's get into it. I always recommend books that I do love and recommend or highly enjoy, but these are the books that I've definitely kept because I feel very much a want to reread or enjoyment level. So the first one is always the Agatha Christie, and that is Murder in Mesopotamia. Love this one. I gave it 4 stars, but I really want to reread it, and I think it will get a 5-star on the reread. This one is about Hercule Poirot, but mostly it's about a nurse who goes to Mesopotamia to help with a lady who is seeing a stalker everywhere, and everyone thinks she's crazy. Hercule Poirot comes along later when there's a death in Mesopotamia. It is quite fun, quite fascinating. It's about archaeology, and it is a very brilliant solution. Sorry for the siren. I don't know what's going on outside. Anyways, love this one. Highly recommend checking out this one if you haven't read it before, but especially for this prompt. Next up, I have the Wizard of Oz series. Oz is a location, and I highly recommend checking out this series if you have never read The Wizard of Oz before. The series is by Frank Baum, and I am, I think, on book 9 out of the 15-book series. I really enjoyed the earlier books. The later books are okay. They're not great. They're good, but not great. But the first several books are fantastic, in my opinion. I highly enjoy them, and I thoroughly love the world building that Frank Baum brings to us. So the first 3 books I thoroughly love, and my favorite book growing up, that's a favorite memory of mine, is The Ozma of Oz from this series. So I would check out this book series if you have never done so before. It is a wonderful series to read with a child or by yourself. The audiobooks are on LibriVox for free if you want to as well. Highly recommend checking this one out. One book that I've lost its dust jacket and I cannot find it, but I thoroughly loved it, was Mexican Gothic. Mexican is okay for this prompt. It's kind of a stretch, but still is. This is a light horror, but kind of not. It kept me guessing at every turn. I thoroughly loved reading this one, and the suspense, the creepiness. I am not a big horror reader, so maybe that's why I definitely felt the buildup. But also I felt like this one just had such an element of historical and Mexican culture in it. It was definitely set in the 1950s with a family that are not able to leave their house. And Noemi, who is so close to my name, I really love that element. But Noemi goes to try and save her cousin from the crazy family, and she doesn't really understand what's going on. I really loved this element of horror, but also this suspicion and what's going on. And I don't want to say anything more. I'd highly recommend checking this one out as well. The next one comes as kind of a package deal. If you've never read Mansfield Park, I highly recommend you do. This is one of Jane Austen's least favorite novels, at least for many people. She loved this book, but I thoroughly enjoy this one. It has such a complexity to it and a depth. I think that if you reread this one especially, you'll understand how the buildup is. It is a slow-paced novel, but I think it has such a complexity, like I said. I made a whole dedicated review of it if you would like to check that out. But if you have read this one and you want to read a retelling, Central Park by Deborah Whitesmith is a retelling of this one. So this one is called Central Park, which is also a location. And this one is about another girl who is a foster sibling, so not direct cousins like this one is, because in this one cousins are living together and under the same house in kind of romantic triangles. But in this one, they are foster cousins and or foster siblings in that regard. And it is the same kind of premise as Mansfield Park, where a poor relation or poor younger child comes into the home and they are learning what it's like. I really enjoyed this retelling of Central Park, or of Mansfield Park, I should say. And I am very excited to recommend this book finally for some reason. If you've never started the series of Crazy Rich Asians, this is a great time to do it. I really loved the first book of this. It is a bit more romancy than literary, but the series continues on in a literary sense. It definitely has a literary feel though, so if you're going in thinking it's full-on romance, I would be cautionary of that. I gave this one 5 stars though. I really love the literary aspects. And this one follows a woman named Rachel who is going to meet her boyfriend's family for the first time, and she does not realize that they are ultra rich. It's very fun. And I mean, it's a, what is it called? I'm drawing a blank on the word right now, but it is not meant to be taken seriously. It's meant to be a joke at the people, but at the same time, it is very real to some things. And so I think you can take it with a grain of salt and laugh at it, but at the same time, there are lessons to be learned from this story. And if I remember the word, I will put it up on screen. I know it, but I just can't think of it right now. I'm sorry. So anyways, highly recommend this one. And I gave all 3 books in the series 5 stars. 3 books in series, 5 stars. A historical fiction about World War II that's not super sad is The Grunty Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Mary Ann Schaffer and Annie Burroughs. This one it's done in letters, so it's definitely a fast novel. And I listened to this on a full cast audiobook, which I highly recommend this way. It was just such an interesting one with all the different voices reading the different letters. And you follow a woman named Juliet who is discovering this island that was occupied by the Germans, but they weren't protected by the British, even though they are British people. So it's just a really interesting story and talks about the time of World War II. It's not heavy, but it is also covering those topics of people being sent to camps and the Germans staying with them on their island. It is very fascinating, and it follows this group of people who have formed their own little literary book club because they had no choice to connect in another way. I think it's fascinating. It's very short, and like I said, it's in letters. It's an epistolary book, so recommend checking it out if you haven't. And the Netflix movie is a fantastic adaptation of this book, I will say. So both of them I would highly recommend reading and watching together. You might have noticed there's no nonfiction on this list yet. So my first and only nonfiction for this list, although there are many nonfiction I could recommend, is Behind Enemy Lines, the true story of how a French-Jewish spy, in Nazi Germany. So this one's by Marta Cohn, and I read it last year and loved it. It's an amazing story about Marta as she goes into Germany as a French-Jewish woman, and she looks German with her blonde hair and her very petite stature, so no one expects that she's a spy, but she is because of her heritage. She grew up speaking French and German in the home, and so she knows perfectly what to do, and it is a fantastic story, an amazing story of how she infiltrated it and took back information, what she did, and all these different things of how her family survived, what they did as a family, and their survival. It is an amazing book. I highly recommend checking this one out as well. This list is probably my favorite list of books to recommend, honestly, for a Buzzwordathon list. A romance that is a historical romance, but basically just a romance, is Somewhere in France by Jennifer Robson. This one I really loved. This one follows 2 people who knew each other as children, but as the war goes on, this one I think is in World War I believe it's the Great War as they call it. Yeah, it's 1914, and Lily is trying to help in the war efforts, but she is kind of from a high stature family, so she's a lady, and she basically decides, I'm going to help, and so she becomes an ambulance driver, and her family friends, or her brother's friend, is a doctor, and there's a romance blooming. It is a wonderful story about the front lines in the Great War, the First World War, but also about these 2 people who are serving in a way on the medical field during the war. And I highly recommend checking this one out as well. It's a very sweet romance, and I have book 2 finally, so I can't wait to read that one as well. My last physical book is Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is another classic, which is about a small town where a bunch of women live there, not many men, and they just gossip and have a great time. It is a cozy book, and you can't really go into there expecting much plot. It really is just about these little stories about people and how they live. You don't have an unnamed narrator, I think it is, and she visits these women, and it's just so much fun. These women, what they do and how they talk. There are a lot of spinsters in the town, or older ladies who are widowed, and they just gossip, and it is a hoot. I really enjoy this one of Elizabeth Gaskell's work. She just makes these people come to life in really funny ways, and it is a shorter Elizabeth Gaskell book, and I highly recommend this one as well. It's a nice cozy read too. My last one to recommend is In the Fields of Grace by Tessa Afshar. This one is a biblical fiction book about the story of Ruth and how she has a relationship with Boaz and her mother-in-law Naomi, and I really love this retelling of Ruth in particular. I think this one's a great way of showing the relationship and the struggles that Ruth would have had moving into Israel, but also with Boaz and how that relationship would have moved forward. I love a lot of retellings of Ruth, but this one in particular is one of my favorites. So I highly recommend this one as well. So for my own options, I have so many that I'm looking at. But I am definitely reading Anne of the Island by Ella Montgomery this month, or in March, I should say, as I'm doing this for the Anne read along. And Island is definitely a location. I am very excited about this one. I think this is the one where Anne goes to college, but this is very exciting. I don't want to say too much more about this one. This is the Anne of Green Gables series, so I will be reading this one for sure. And then I also have plans to participate in March Mystery Madness. Put that one down. So I have here The Yellow Room, which is a location in a house. This one's by Mary Roberts Reinhardt, and it's a very short one, which I'm very excited about. Not the length of it, but I'm very excited about this description almost. I don't want to read too much though. I'm very excited about the cover and the title. And then I also have In the Study with the Wrench. This is also another room in the house. And this is the second book in the Clue series. And I have this one by Diana Peterfrood. So these are all three options, but this one is definitely being read in the month of March. So these are my three buzzword possibilities, but definitely the middle one. So I have so many options though, with like locations and titles and like places in the world. You know, this one's a really great one. So please let me know what you're reading, what location you'll be reading in your title. I'd love to hear what you'll be picking out of your own shelf and what you'd recommend for this prompt as well. So please let me know down below in the comments what you think would be a great one for this. Also, please like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you're new here, and I will talk to you next time. Bye for now.